Property management company JHI has said it's planning to expand its African footprint into Zimbabwe and Tanzania. And when it comes to Zimbabwe specifically, the company is forecasting that the country is poised for a quick turnaround in growth, and that really forming much of the basis for its entry in the first place. Joining us now on the line from Zimbabwe is Sean Gammon, Managing Director over at Imara Capital Zimbabwe. That for a quick status check. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon, Sean. Well, more and more companies getting optimistic about the growth prospects in the country, but this at a time when there's still many question marks around the success or failure of the unity government that's currently in place in Zimbabwe at this moment in time. What's your view on the economic growth story within the current socio-political climate?
Yes, thank you, Alicia. Good afternoon. I think it's, if you look back over the last year, it really is a microcosm of what can happen and also some of the frustrations, because it was round about a year ago that we have formally adopted hard currency and did away with the Zimbabwe dollar. And that really allowed, and that together with some other freeing up of exchange controls and things like that, really allowed businesses to start planning and growing and moving forward. And if you look at the first 6 months of the last 12, you saw very rapid growth across the industry and across the economy. You know, with capacity utilization levels going from sort of 5 to 10% in most cases up to 30 and 40%, and in many cases above that. So you saw that very quick growth, you know, as people really reacted to an opening up of the economy, and as things really settled, and obviously that was off a very low base. I think that the second 6 months has shown a little bit more frustration, and really the timing of that, you can say, was very close to going backwards in terms of the GPA to an extent. If you look back to September last year, when the parties decided that you know, to walk out of the GPA and have then been sitting and negotiating since then, you can really say that the economy since then has leveled out. It certainly hasn't gone backwards, but it's not growing anymore. And I think that is probably an underpinning of, you know, of a fall off of confidence to an extent, particularly from foreign investors and from, you know, new foreign capital coming in. And it's very obvious in the economy that there's a lack of liquidity at the moment to keep on driving the gains of the first 6 months.
What's an interesting perspective to be taking, and it's certainly a perspective that has been adopted by JHI, is that with no proper credit system in place, purchases were made on a cash basis, and so the credit crunch has hardly affected the country, and this really working to offset some of the other risks the country presents. Is this really the case? Because ultimately, as you were saying earlier, we are working off a low base to start off with.
Yes, absolutely. It is the case. I mean, you know, sitting in Zimbabwe behind exchange controls and, you know, for sort of 10 years of economic decline, there was absolutely no exposure to external debt and to the sort of credit crunch of the rest of the world. So, you know, if you looked at businesses a year ago, they all had a balance sheet that read zero, but, you know, there was certainly no debt on any of them. You know, since then there's been some build-up of local debt, but still, you know, most corporates are still fairly ungeared. And yes, you're right. You know, we've been isolated from the international problems, and we're probably one of the few real growth stories in the world at the moment.
On the flip side of all of this, Sean, I mean, the rumor mill certainly seems to be working overtime. There seems to be a lot of speculation about when it comes to companies that are actually venturing into the country. Telkom has again denied fresh speculation that it's in discussions to take up 49% of Zimbabwean telco Tel1. Do you see this at all fueling some hype that isn't necessarily there?
Well, I think, you know, we don't see a whole lot of progress really on the ground. There was talk, for example, sort of 6 or so months ago that ShopRite Checkers were going to be coming in together with OK, and that never happened for whatever reason. You know, we haven't been involved in the process at all. But it is interesting that, you know, there is a capital raise going on in OK at the moment, in which Investec is involved. But generally speaking, you're right. You know, there's a lot of interest in Zimbabwe, and we see a lot of people coming through, and we meet a lot of them who are interested in knowing what's happening. But when it comes to actually spending the money, it's a little bit slower and a little bit more cautious.